All right, so today we're going to be um, taking a deep dive into Angie Thomas's novel, The Hate You Give.
Yep.
And we're really going to be focusing on the story itself today.
Yes.
Think of it like a really supercharged book club, right?
Right.
Where you get all the highlights in just a few minutes so,
Exactly.
you can really understand what's happening in the story.
Yeah.
And so to get started, The Hate You Give follows Starr Carter,
Mm-hmm.
right? And she's this 16-year-old girl who is living kind of this double life between her poor, mostly black neighborhood, Garden Heights.
Yes.
And then this really fancy, mostly white prep school, Williamson Prep.
Exactly.
So talk about pressure right from the beginning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like right away in chapter 1, we see Starr at this party in Garden Heights.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden gunshots erupt and everyone's scattering.
Right.
And that's where she runs into Khalil, who's this childhood friend.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens next?
Well, Starr and Khalil decide to leave the party together. And as they're driving home, they get pulled over by this white police officer for a broken taillight.
Okay.
But things escalate really quickly.
Yeah.
And the officer ends up shooting and killing Khalil.
Oh, my gosh.
And Starr is left as the only witness.
So heavy stuff right out of the gate.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So then in chapter 2, we're taken back to Williamson Prep.
Right.
And Starr is just feeling the weight of everything that happened.
Yes.
Khalil's death. And this pressure to stay silent about what she saw.
Hmm.
How is she even handling being back in this environment?
Well, she feels totally out of place.
Yeah.
You know, she's surrounded by all these wealthy white students.
Right.
And she just doesn't feel like she belongs.
Yeah.
She even has a hard time being around her boyfriend, Chris.
Oh, really?
Who's white.
Okay.
Because he reminds her of the officer.
Oh, wow.
So she's really struggling with her grief.
Yeah.
The fear of speaking out and trying to maintain this sense of normalcy.
That's a lot for anyone to go through, let alone a teenager. Yeah, absolutely.
So then in chapter 3, Starr and her mom go to meet with the detectives who are investigating the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't really go as planned.
No.
So what happens during that meeting?
Well, it's clear that the detectives are more focused on portraying Khalil as this, like, thug or criminal than actually uncovering the truth about what happened. They twist Starr's words, and they try to imply that Khalil was somehow responsible for his own death.
Oh, God.
Leaving Starr feeling really frustrated and unheard.
That's so awful.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation.
So then in chapter 4, things kind of blow up even more, right?
Yes.
Khalil's death becomes this national news story.
Right.
And it sparks protests and unrest, especially in Garden Heights.
Yeah.
So how does all this attention impact Starr and her family?
Well, the media starts painting this really negative picture of Khalil, perpetuating all these harmful stereotypes. And so this really intensifies the pressure on Starr.
Especially when you consider the threats that are coming from King.
Oh, yeah?
Who's the leader of the local gang, the King Lords.
Okay.
And so now the family's fearing for their safety. And they're worried about their business, too.
That's terrible.
That's a really tough spot for them to be in.
So in chapter 5, we really get to see more into Starr's family life.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about her parents, Maverick and Lisa, and the support system that they provide for her?
Sure. So Starr's parents, they become her anchor throughout all of this.
Okay.
Her dad, Maverick, who everyone calls Maeve, he really instills in her this sense of pride and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. And then Lisa, her mom, she's fiercely protective of Starr and her other kids.
Right.
She wants to shield them from the harsh realities of their neighborhood.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So they both provide different but really important forms of support for Starr.
Yeah, I can see that.
As she's going through all of this.
So chapter 6 takes us to Khalil's funeral, which is like a really turning point in the story.
Yes.
What are some of the key events that unfold during the funeral?
Well, at the funeral, Starr meets this lawyer and activist named April Ofra. Who's fighting for justice for Khalil. And April really encourages Starr to use her experience to make a difference, to spark change. But then we also see King come in, and he drapes a bandana on Khalil's casket.
Oh, wow.
Insinuating that he was part of the gang. And this just further twists the narrative of who Khalil was.
Gosh, it seems like they're just adding another layer of complexity
absolutely.
to this already tragic situation.
Right.
So then in chapter 7, Starr is facing even more pressure.
Yes.
Right, from those who want her to stay silent, but also those who want her to speak out.
Right.
What ends up pushing Starr closer to making a decision?
It's a combination of things.
Okay.
On one hand, you have this pressure from her community and her family to stay quiet for her own safety.
Okay.
Then you have people like April who are urging her to come forward and tell the truth.
Right.
And all this conflicting pressure is really weighing heavily on Starr.
Yeah.
It's affecting her friendships, especially with Chris, who's struggling to understand the racial dynamics of the situation.
Right.
And then, to make matters even more complicated, Devontae, a member of King's gang, he reaches out to Starr's dad, Mav, for help.
Okay.
And he reveals that King is planning to silence him permanently.
Oh my gosh.
So now Mav's life is in danger too.
This is getting really intense.
It is.
So then in Chapter 8, we see Mav taking a huge risk to protect Devontae.
Yes.
So can you tell us more about his decision and what happens?
Yeah. So Mav sees the danger Devontae is in, and he offers him refuge in his home.
Okay.
But he knows that's not a long-term solution. King wants Devontae dead.
Yeah.
And he'll stop at nothing to get to him. So Mav decides to send Devontae to stay with Starr's Uncle Carlos, who happens to be a police officer.
Wow, that's a risky move.
It is.
Yeah, putting Mav at odds with King and his entire gang.
Yeah, he's essentially choosing sides at this point.
It seems like things are escalating really quickly.
They are.
So then Chapter 9 focuses on Starr's struggle with whether or not to testify.
Right.
What ultimately leads to her decision?
Well, Starr's internal battle reaches this breaking point.
Okay.
When she sees this video of Khalil's death surface online.
Oh, wow.
And despite the fear of King's threats and the pressure to stay silent, she realizes how important it is to share her truth and to honor Khalil's memory.
That's a powerful moment.
It is.
And it takes a lot of courage for her to come to that decision.
It does.
I think this feels like a good point to pause and let our listeners process everything we've covered so far.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah, so we'll pick up with Chapter 10 in the next part of our deep dive into the hate you give her.
Sounds good. It definitely took a lot of courage for her to make that choice.
Yeah, so in Chapter 10, we're taken to the grand jury hearing.
Right.
Where Starr has to recount everything that happened that night. What were some of the key moments from her testimony?
Well, Starr, she really challenges the narrative that's been pushed by the police and the media.
Okay.
You know, she details what actually happened during the traffic stop.
Right.
And her testimony, it really provides this humanizing perspective of Khalil. You know, it contrasts with this distorted image that's been presented in the news and everything. So it's a really powerful moment.
Wow. So then in Chapter 11, it's like this huge blow to the community.
Yes.
And especially to Starr. What does the grand jury decide?
Well, they decide not to indict the officer.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And this sparks outrage.
Yeah.
And a whole new wave of protests in Garden Heights. Yeah. And it just deepens the community's distrust of the justice system and really highlights the systemic biases that are at play.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It is.
So then in Chapter 12, we see Starr starting to channel all this anger and frustration into action. How does her activism evolve after the grand jury's decision?
Well, she's fueled by this injustice, right? And she joins the protests alongside Devontae and Chris and her half-brother, Seven.
Wow, so she's really taking a stand.
She is, and there's even this really intense moment where Starr throws back a tear gas canister at the police.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it shows how much she's changed. You know, she's not afraid to fight back anymore.
That scene really highlights the transformation that she's gone through.
It does.
Yeah. So then in Chapter 13, the conflict, it gets even closer to home.
Right.
What happens at Mav's store?
Well, Starr and her friends, they're looking for relief from the tear gas after the protest.
Okay.
And they end up trapped inside Mav's store.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and that's when King and his gang show up.
Oh, gosh.
And they're planning to burn it down.
What?
Yeah, it's retaliation for Mav helping Devontae.
Wow. So Chapter 14 is just filled with all this tension.
It is.
As Mav confronts King.
Right.
How does that confrontation play out?
Well, Mav, he's defending his family and his store.
Okay.
And he stands up to King and his gang.
Wow.
And in a really desperate move to protect his loved ones, he tells the police that King was the one who tried to burn down the store.
Oh, my God.
So this leads to King's arrest.
It was a risky decision.
It was.
Yeah, and it definitely has consequences.
Right.
So in Chapter 15, we see the aftermath of the fire and King's arrest. What's the impact on the community and on the Carter family?
Well, Mapp's store is destroyed,
Yeah.
but the community really rallies around the family,
Okay.
offering support and showing this newfound sense of unity.
That's good.
It is, but the danger isn't over.
Right.
Devante knows that King is still a threat.
Yeah.
And so he takes this courageous step.
Okay. That leads us to chapter 16, where Devante makes this life-altering decision.
Yes.
Can you tell us about his choice?
Well, he decides to cooperate with the police.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he gives them information about King's criminal activities.
Okay.
It's a really risky move, but he's driven by this desire for change and for self-preservation.
That makes sense.
So then in chapter 17, we shift focus a bit to Starr's personal growth.
Okay.
And how she's navigating her relationships.
Right.
How is she evolving as a person through all these trials? Well, she emerges as this leader and a voice for change.
Okay.
You know, she inspires those around her, and her relationship with Chris deepens.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he gains a better understanding of her experiences.
Right.
And the realities of racism.
Okay.
So their bond, it strengthens. It's founded on empathy and shared values.
I like that.
So then finally in chapter 18,
Yeah.
we reach the end of Starr's journey in the hate you give.
What message of hope does the story leave us with?
Well, the novel concludes with Starr dedicating herself to continued activism.
Okay.
She's determined to use her voice to fight for justice.
Right.
And despite the losses they've endured, the Carter family, they rebuild.
Right.
They find strength in their unity and the community support.
That's great.
Yeah, and the story really emphasizes the power of resilience, hope, and speaking truth to power, even when you're facing adversity.
Man, we covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah, we did.
It's incredible to see Starr's transformation, right?
It really is.
From that first party scene to becoming this powerful advocate for justice.
Yeah, a complete 180.
So, having walked through the entire story of The Hate You Give, what would you say are like the biggest takeaways for readers?
Well, the novel, it touches on so many crucial issues.
Yeah.
It highlights the power of, finding your voice, even when it's scary.
Yeah.
And the importance of speaking out against injustice.
Absolutely.
And it also explores, this complex reality of code switching and the weight of carrying multiple identities. Something that resonates with a lot of people, especially young people of color.
Yeah. And it doesn't shy away from portraying the realities of systemic racism.
Absolutely not.
And the biases that we see in our society.
Yeah.
Especially within the justice system.
For sure.
Angie Thomas does a really great job of weaving these complex themes.
She does.
Into this engaging and relatable story.
Right.
So it's both a compelling read and a powerful call to action.
Exactly.
There's that one line from Starr that always sticks with me.
Oh, yeah.
She says, what's the point of having a voice if you're going to be silent in those moments you shouldn't be?
Oh, that's such a powerful quote.
It is.
It really captures the essence of the book.
Yeah.
Encouraging us to be active, to use our voices to challenge injustice.
Right.
And to fight for a better future.
This deep dive into The Hate You Give has been really impactful for me.
Me too.
The story is gripping and thought-provoking.
Definitely.
And leaves you with this sense of hope and empowerment.
I agree.
I think it's a must-read.
It is.
For anyone who wants to engage with these important conversations and understand, the complexities of our world.
Couldn't say it better myself.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Of course.
We hope this has given you a deeper appreciation for The Hate You Give.
Yeah.
And inspired you to pick up the book yourself.
Absolutely.
It's a story that will stay with you long after you finish reading it.
For sure.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
We'll see you in our next deep dive.